Welcome to the Berkshires, a place in western Massachusetts of stunning natural beauty, where rolling hills cradle quaint towns and a rich cultural history echoes through the valleys. But look closer. Beyond the vibrant fall foliage and the celebrated art festivals lies another, more mysterious landscape, a world of whispers and shadows, where history and folklore intertwine. The ancient hills of the Berkshires keep secrets. They tell tales of spectral soldiers still marching to revolutionary posts, of railroad tunnels haunted by the ghosts of those who built them, and of strange lights that dance in the sky, defying all explanation. In this video, we'll journey into that other Berkshire, exploring 10 of its most enduring and unsettling legends. From the tragic to the terrifying, these are stories that remind us that even in the most idyllic places, the veil between our world and the unknown can be unnervingly thin. The evening of September 1, 1969, settled over the rolling hills and quiet towns of Berkshire County, Massachusetts, like any other late summer night. It was Labor Day, a final, gentle exhalation before the crisp arrival of autumn. Families were returning from picnics and end-of-season swims, the air filled with the scent of cut grass and the sound of crickets. But as dusk bled into darkness, an inexplicable and profoundly strange series of events unfolded that would forever mark the region and the lives of those who witnessed it. What occurred that night would become known as the Great Barrington UFO Incident, one of the most credible, compelling, and widely witnessed UFO sightings in American history. At the heart of the incident are the harrowing accounts of multiple independent groups of people scattered across several towns, including Sheffield, Great Barrington, and Stockbridge. While dozens, if not hundreds, of people saw something unusual in the sky, the most detailed and startling testimonies involve claims of close encounters and even abduction. The most famous of these is the story of the Reed family. 9-year-old Thomas Reed was in the car with his mother, Nancy, his grandmother, and his younger brother, Matthew. They were driving home from their family restaurant, heading toward the iconic covered bridge in Sheffield. As they approached the bridge, a silent, ethereal glow began to illuminate the trees from within the woods. The light intensified, coalescing into a solid, luminous object that rose into the air. In interviews years later, Tom Reed would describe it as a self-contained glow, an orb of light that seemed to move with intelligent purpose. As their car crossed the bridge, the object was upon them. The interior of the vehicle was flooded with a brilliant white light. The family experienced a sensation of profound silence and a strange change in barometric pressure, as if they were in the eye of a hurricane. What happened next is a mosaic of fragmented, dreamlike memories. Tom recalls being in a vast, hangar-like space, seeing his mother and brother on separate tables, and feeling a sense of calm despite the bizarre circumstances. His next conscious memory was being back in the car, with his mother now driving on the opposite side of the road from where the encounter began. An inexplicable period of time, roughly 2 hours, had passed. The family was disoriented and shaken, unable to fully process the impossible event they had just endured. They spoke little of it for years, the memory a confusing and frightening secret. Just a few miles away, in Great Barrington, another young boy named Tom, 10-year-old Tom Warner, was playing at a neighbor's house. As he started to head home, he saw a saucer-shaped craft hovering silently over the field next to his yard. A beam of light shot down, and he found himself paralyzed, running in place but going nowhere. He felt as though he was lifted off the ground. His next memory is of being back in the field with the object gone. Like the Reeds, he was left with a profound sense of confusion and a story too incredible to share. The sightings were not limited to these two families. At Lake Mansfield, teenager Melanie Kirchdorfer and her family were in their car when a blinding light engulfed them. The light seemed to rise from the lake itself. Her father, startled and curious, began to chase the object. Melanie's memory of the event is fractured, but she recalls a feeling of levitation and being inside a craft, seeing other children there, before waking up alone by the lake, having to walk home in a daze. Adding further credibility to the event was the testimony of Jane Green, a respected local citizen and radio host. That same evening, she was driving with a friend when she saw the object. She stopped her car, along with several other drivers, and watched as a massive, silent craft hovered at eye level just a short distance away. She described the experience as the most profound of her life, leaving her with no doubt that she had witnessed something not of this world. The consistency in the descriptions from these disparate witnesses is striking. All describe a silent, large, luminous object, either saucer-shaped or a glowing orb, capable of hovering motionless before moving away at incredible speeds. The light it emitted was brilliant but not blinding, and many reported the strange sensation of a dead, enveloping silence during the encounter. In the immediate aftermath, there was a strange lack of official documentation. No police reports or official media accounts from that night have ever been found, leading some to speculate that the records were either never made or were subsequently erased. For decades, the witnesses remained largely silent, fearing ridicule and disbelief. It was only as adults that they began to find each other and share their stories, discovering the powerful corroboration in their shared experiences. The tide began to turn in the 21st century. As the witnesses came forward, their stories gained traction, culminating in official recognition. In 2015, the Great Barrington Historical Society formally acknowledged the 1969 incident as a significant, credible historical event. A monument was erected near the Sheffield Bridge to commemorate the encounter, a testament to the town's acceptance of its strange and important place in UFO lore. The case was later brought to a global audience when it was featured in an episode of the Netflix reboot of Unsolved Mysteries, allowing the witnesses to tell their stories in their own words to millions. The Great Barrington UFO Incident remains a profound mystery. Skeptics have tried to explain it away as misidentified aircraft or meteorological phenomena, but these explanations fail to account for the close-range encounters, the missing time, and the sheer number of credible witnesses. The consistency of the testimonies, the lasting psychological impact on those who were there, and the eventual historical recognition of the event make it a cornerstone of UFO research. On that quiet Labor Day evening in 1969, something extraordinary visited the Berkshires, leaving behind a legacy of wonder, fear, and a question that still hangs in the New England sky. What did they see? Now, in the rugged northwestern corner of Massachusetts, the Hoosac Mountain stands as a formidable barrier of solid rock, a geological challenge that for decades thwarted the dreams of westward expansion of the state's burgeoning railway system. To conquer it, engineers and laborers embarked on one of the most ambitious, dangerous, and ultimately tragic construction projects of the 19th century, the Hoosac Tunnel. Completed in 1875 after nearly a quarter century of relentless effort, the nearly 5-mile-long tunnel was hailed as a marvel of modern engineering at the time. But the triumph was paid for in human lives, and the dark, damp bore through the mountain earned a grim and enduring nickname, the Bloody Pit. It's a name born from tragedy and from the ghosts that are said to linger as permanent testament to the tunnel's horrific human cost. The project began in 1851, and from the outset, it was plagued by disaster. The work was grueling, the technology was primitive, and the dangers were constant. Men toiled in near total darkness, their way lit only by faint lanterns, breathing air thick with rock dust and the fumes of black powder. Cave-ins, floods, and equipment failures were common. The death toll began to climb almost immediately. But the true horror was unleashed with the introduction of a new, terrifyingly unstable tool, nitroglycerin. The Hoosac Tunnel was one of the first major American construction projects to use the volatile explosive on a massive scale. While it did dramatically speed up the work, it also multiplied the dangers exponentially, leading to catastrophic explosions that killed dozens of men in an instant. It's estimated that nearly 200 workers perished during the tunnel's construction, their lives sacrificed to the relentless push of progress. From this litany of death, Specific tragedies emerged that would form the bedrock of the tunnel's haunted lore. One of the most foundational tales is that of Ringo Kelly, Ned Brinkman, and Billy Nash. On March 20, 1865, the three miners were working deep inside the tunnel when Kelly, a demolition expert, accidentally detonated a blast prematurely. Brinkman and Nash were killed instantly. Kelly survived, but he was ostracized by the other workers, who blamed him for the deaths of their friends. A year to the day after the accident, on March 20, 1866, Ringo Kelly's body was found deep within the tunnel, at the exact spot where his colleagues had died. He had been strangled to death. No culprit was ever found, and the authorities were baffled. The miners, however, had their own theory. The vengeful spirits of Brinkman and Nash had returned from the grave to exact their revenge. The most infamous disaster occurred on October 17, 1867, at the tunnel's 1,028-foot deep central shaft, a vertical access point used to excavate the tunnel from the middle out. 13 men were working at the bottom of the shaft when a naphtha lamp ignited flammable gas that had accumulated in the shaft. The resulting explosion sent a fireball rocketing up the shaft, destroying the hoist mechanism and setting the timber frame building at the top ablaze. The fire rained down a torrent of flaming debris, white-hot tools, and sharpened drill bits onto the men trapped below. Rescue attempts were impossible. The shaft was choked with smoke and poisonous gas, and with the hoist destroyed, there was no way to reach the bottom. After a few attempts, the workers on the surface assumed no one could have survived the inferno and the subsequent lack of oxygen. Months later, after the shaft was finally cleared, a grim discovery was made. The workers found the bodies of the 13 miners, some of whom had clearly survived the initial blast. They had fashioned a crude raft to escape the rising water at the bottom of the shaft and had waited in vain for a rescue that never came. The official cause of death of most of them was asphyxiation. The discovery of their desperate, failed attempt at survival horrified the public and cemented the tunnel's reputation as a place of profound tragedy. Even before the tunnel was completed, stories of hauntings began to circulate. Workers, terrified to enter certain sections, reported hearing the agonizing moans of the dead, the clang of spectral tools against rock, and the disembodied whispers of their fallen comrades. Apparitions of miners, their faces grim and their bodies sometimes horribly mangled, were said to appear in the flickering lantern light, only to vanish into the oppressive darkness. Now, these weren't just idle tales. The fear was so palpable that it led to work stoppages and made it difficult to retain laborers. Since its completion, the legend of the Hoosac Tunnel's ghosts has only grown. For over a century, railroad workers, maintenance crews, and paranormal investigators have shared chilling accounts of their experiences inside the tunnel. The wails of the 13 men trapped in the central shaft are said to echo through the tunnel, particularly on cold October nights. The ghostly figures of miners, still carrying their lanterns, are seen walking the tracks, forever on their way to a shift they will never complete. Visitors report sudden, inexplicable drops in temperature, the feeling of being touched by unseen hands, and an overwhelming sense of sorrow and dread. Disembodied voices are a common report, sometimes whispering warnings to get out. The Hoosac Tunnel stands today as a dual monument. It's a testament to the indomitable will and ingenuity of the 19th century engineers and workers who conquered a mountain. But it's also a sprawling 5-mile-long tomb, a permanent memorial to the nearly 200 souls who were crushed, drowned, blown to bits, or suffocated within its rocky confines. Whether one believes in ghosts or not, to stand at the mouth of the tunnel is to feel the weight of its history. The cold, damp air that flows from its dark maw seems to carry with it the echoes of the past, of suffering, of sacrifice, and of the stories that ensure the men who died in the bloody pit will never be forgotten. In the heart of the Berkshires, nestled amidst manicured gardens and serene woodlands in Lenox, Massachusetts, stands the Mount. It was the cherished home of Edith Wharton, one of America's most celebrated authors, a woman of formidable intellect and refined taste who designed the house herself as a sanctuary for creativity and intellectual pursuit. Yet, for all its beauty and elegance, the Mount is imbued with a profound and unsettling atmosphere. a place where the veil between worlds feels thin. It's widely considered one of the most haunted historic homes in all of New England, a reputation deeply intertwined with the life and psyche of its famous former resident, who, despite her sophisticated worldly persona, harbored a lifelong, paralyzing fear of ghosts. Wharton's terror of the supernatural was not a casual superstition, it was a deep-seated phobia that began in her childhood. She traced its origins to a bout of typhoid fever at age 9, after which she was plagued by what she described as a nameless, formless dread that lurked just beyond the veil of perception. This fear was so intense that for years she could not sleep in a room with a book containing a ghost story and had to be accompanied in a room after dark. This profound anxiety would, paradoxically, fuel some of her most masterful writing. Wharton became one of the finest ghost story writers in the English language, penning tales like The Eyes and Afterward, which are celebrated for their psychological depth and chilling ambiguity. She understood that the most terrifying ghosts are not those that rattle chains, but those that rise from the depths of the human mind, from guilt, regret, and unspoken desires. It's this very understanding that makes the alleged hauntings of her own beloved home so compelling. The Mount was Wharton's sanctuary from 1902 to 1911, a period of immense literary productivity. It was here she wrote some of her most famous novels, including The House of Mirth and Ethan Frome. But it was also a place of personal turmoil. Her marriage to the affable but mentally unstable Teddy Wharton was deteriorating, and the house bore witness to their growing estrangement and Teddy's descent into mental illness. It is this potent mixture of creative energy, intellectual passion, and profound personal sorrow that paranormal enthusiasts believe charged the house with a lasting spiritual energy. Since the Mount was restored and open to the public, staff, visitors, and paranormal investigators have reported a wide array of unexplained phenomena. The activity seems to concentrate in several key areas, most notably Edith Wharton's own bedroom and library. In her bedroom, people have reported feeling a distinct, intelligent presence. Figures have been seen sitting on the edge of the bed, and disembodied voices, often female, have been heard whispering when no one is there. The scent of floral perfume, like the kind Wharton favored, has been known to suddenly fill the air. The library, the intellectual heart of the home, is another hub of activity. Visitors have felt unseen hands brush against them, heard the faint rustle of a dress, and seen books inexplicably move on the shelves. The most common report is of a shadowy figure seen moving through the room or standing near the fireplace, believed by many to be the spirit of Wharton herself, still presiding over her beloved collection of books. Teddy Wharton's presence is also said to linger. His former bedroom, known as the dog room for the canine portraits that once hung there, is often described as having a heavy, oppressive atmosphere. People have reported hearing heavy, masculine footsteps pacing the floor and the faint, melancholic sound of a man sighing. It's as if his unhappiness and turmoil left a permanent stain on the space. Perhaps the most unsettling claims come from the third floor, which once served as the servants' quarters. The area has a darker, more foreboding reputation. During a period when the house was used as a dormitory for a girls' school, residents reported terrifying activity, including doors slamming, objects being thrown by an unseen force, and ghostly apparitions that caused students to flee in terror. Paranormal investigators from shows like Ghost Hunters have captured numerous electronic voice phenomena, or EVPs, in these rooms. Disembodied voices responding to questions that are only audible upon playback. These voices have been described as both male and female, suggesting a number of spirits may inhabit the old house. The spirit of a former governess or nanny is also said to haunt the premises, often seen as a gentle, caring presence in the nursery rooms. Her apparition is sometimes accompanied by the sound of a woman softly humming a lullaby. What makes the hauntings of the Mount so fascinating is their deep connection to Edith Wharton herself. Did her intense fear of the paranormal somehow make her home a magnet for spirits? Or did her own powerful spirit, so deeply connected to the house she designed and loved, choose to remain there after death? The phenomena reported, the intellectual energy of the library, the personal sorrow in the bedrooms, the very act of a writer of ghost stories, seemingly becoming a ghost herself, are layered with a poignant literary irony. Today, the Mount fully embraces its haunted reputation, offering popular ghost tours that draw crowds of curious visitors. Whether the apparitions are genuine spirits, psychic residue from a turbulent past, or simply the product of imagination in a creaky old house, the experience of walking through its darkened halls is undeniably chilling. It's a place where history, literature, and the supernatural converge, leaving one with a distinct feeling that Edith Wharton, the master of the American ghost story, is still at home. Covering over 16,500 acres of rugged terrain, October Mountain State Forest is the largest state forest in Massachusetts, a vast and untamed wilderness sprawling across the towns of Washington, Beckett, and Lenox. Its dense woodlands, deep valleys, and remote swamps are a haven for hikers, hunters, and nature lovers. But beneath the canopy of its towering trees, a darker, more mysterious reputation has taken root. For centuries, this sprawling forest has been the epicenter of one of the Berkshires' most enduring and unsettling legends, the tale of the Wild Man of October Mountain. The stories are as old as the settlements that first cautiously pushed against the forest's edge. The earliest accounts, dating back to the 19th century, speak of a strange, solitary figure roaming the deepest part of the woods. These initial reports were often vague, describing a man living in a primitive state, covered in hair and avoiding all human contact. An 1879 article in the New York Times reported on two young Vermont men who, while hunting in the mountains south of Williamstown, encountered a wild man about 5 feet tall and completely covered in hair. The men were so terrified by the sight that they dropped their guns and fled, never daring to return for their belongings. This account, and others like it, painted a picture of a feral human, a man who had either been raised in isolation or had forsaken civilization for a life in the wild. As the 20th century progressed, the legend began to evolve, merging with the growing North American phenomenon of Bigfoot. The wild man became something larger, more powerful, and distinctly less human. Sightings began to describe not just a hairy man, but a massive bipedal creature standing between 6 and 8 feet tall, covered in dark, matted fur, and possessing an immense physical strength. Its eyes were often described as glowing an eerie red in the dark, a detail that became a terrifying hallmark of the modern legend. One of the most well-known modern encounters occurred in the 1970s. A group of men camping deep within the forest were awakened in the middle of the night by strange noises just outside their campsite. When they went to investigate, their flashlights caught a glimpse of a towering, hairy creature moving through the trees. Later, as they were hastily packing up to leave, their car's headlights illuminated the beast again, lurking behind a thicket of bushes. They described a creature that stood fully erect, with a powerful build and glowing red eyes that seemed to burn in the darkness. Around the same time, a local Boy Scout leader reported that he and one of his scouts had also caught a fleeting glimpse of a similar creature while hiking in the same area, lending credence to the camper's frightening tale. The legend of the wild man is intertwined with other strange tales from the mountain. For years, stories circulated about a reclusive woman, sometimes called the Hag of the Mountain or the Witch of Washington, who lived in a dilapidated shack deep in the woods. She was said to shun all visitors, practice folk magic, and live in a state of near-total isolation. While her story is likely that of a misunderstood and marginalized woman, her presence added to the mountain's mystique, blurring the lines between human outcasts and supernatural beings. It's possible that some sightings attributed to the wild man were, in fact, glimpses of this solitary woman, her form obscured by the dense forest and the fearful imaginations of those who saw her. Over the years, numerous theories have been proposed to explain the persistent sightings. To believers in cryptozoology, October Mountain is a prime habitat for a population of Gigantopithecus, a creature commonly known as Sasquatch or Bigfoot. They argue that this vast, remote forest provides the perfect environment for such a large primate to live undetected. Skeptics, however, offer more mundane explanations. most common being misidentification. The forest is home to a healthy population of black bears, which, when standing on their hind legs, can present a startlingly humanoid silhouette, especially in low light. A fleeting glimpse of a bear crashing through the underbrush could easily be mistaken for something more monstrous by a startled hiker. Another plausible theory is that the sightings are of human hermits. Throughout history, the vast wilderness of the Berkshires has attracted those wishing to escape society. A person living off the grid for years would likely appear disheveled, hairy, and wild to anyone who stumbled upon them. Yet, no single theory has been able to fully dispel the legend. The forest itself seems to cultivate the mystery. Its sheer size makes it impossible to fully police or explore. It's a landscape filled with abandoned farmsteads, forgotten cemeteries, and the ruins of old charcoal kilns, all slowly being reclaimed by nature. To wander its trails is to feel a sense of profound isolation, a feeling that you are a visitor in a place with secrets far older than your own. It's an environment where the snap of a twig can sound like a footstep, and a shadow can take on a menacing form. The Wild Man of October Mountain remains an icon of Berkshire folklore, a symbol of the untamed wilderness that still exists at the edges of our modern world. Whether it's a genuine cryptid, a misidentified animal, a human outcast, a feral human, or simply a ghost story passed down through generations, the legend endures. It taps into a primal fear of the dark woods and the unsettling possibility that we are not always alone when we venture into them. Now, in the southern Berkshires, where the landscape softens into rolling hills and quiet valleys, the town of Egremont lies steeped in a history that predates the nation itself. Ancient stone walls crisscross the forest, and old roads whisper tales of a bygone era. It's here, on the lonely slopes of Tomball Mountain, that one of the region's most poignant and enduring ghost stories resides, the legend of the ghostly soldier, a solitary spectral figure from the Revolutionary War, forever bound to his post. The identity of this phantom sentinel is lost to time, his story fractured into two compelling yet contradictory narratives. However, in both versions, he is a soldier of the Continental Army, a man who met his end on the mountain during the tumultuous years of the American Revolution. But the circumstances of his death and the reasons for his eternal vigil are the subject of local debate. The more romantic and tragic version of the tale casts the soldier as a loyal patriot. During the war, the Berkshires served as a crucial supply line and a source of manpower for the revolutionary cause. It is plausible that strategic caches of weapons, gunpowder, or funds would have been hidden in the remote wilderness, far from the prying eyes of British spies and loyalist sympathizers. In this telling of the tale, the soldier was entrusted with the solemn duty of guarding one such hidden treasure. He was a faithful sentry, steadfast at his post, until he was discovered and killed by enemy scouts or Tory marauders. Unaware that the war had long since ended and that his duty had been fulfilled, his loyal spirit continues its watch, eternally guarding the long-forgotten secrets of the Revolution. His apparition, then, is not one of menace, but of profound, unwavering duty. The second, more sinister version of the legend paints the soldier as a traitor. In this narrative, he was a paymaster or officer who, tempted by greed, absconded with a chest of gold coins meant for the Continental troops. He fled into the wilderness of Tomball Mountain, intending to bury his ill-gotten treasure and return for it when the war was over. But his crime did not go unpunished. He was either tracked down and put to a demise by his own comrades, or he met a grim, solitary end through accident, misfortune, or exposure on the unforgiven mountain. His spirit, now cursed by his avarice, is forever bound to the location of his buried treasure, unable to rest and compelled to guard the gold he can never spend. Regardless of whether he is a hero or a villain, the descriptions of the ghostly encounters have remained remarkably consistent for generations. He's almost always seen at dusk, or in the ethereal light of a full moon, a forlorn figure, clad in the tattered remains of a colonial-era uniform. He appears along the old, disused logging trails that wind up the mountain, or near the crumbling stone walls that mark the boundaries of forgotten farms. Witnesses often report seeing him pacing slowly, his head bowed as if in deep thought or sorrow. Sometimes he even carries a spectral musket. Other times, his hands are empty. The most unsettling accounts describe him as standing still, staring intently at a particular spot on the ground, or even appearing to be digging with his bare hands before vanishing as the witness draws closer. He never speaks, and no sound accompanies his movements, not even the crunch of leaves or the snap of a twig. He is a silent, sorrowful apparition, a fleeting glimpse of history that leaves a lasting chill. The version of the legend involving buried treasure has, predictably, inspired numerous treasure hunters over the years. Armed with old maps, metal detectors, and a romantic sense of adventure, people have scoured the slopes of Tomball Mountain searching for the revolutionary gold. Yet, no one has ever claimed to have found it. According to local lore, the ghost himself ensures the treasure remains hidden. It's said that he actively misleads those who come seeking his gold, causing them to become hopelessly lost on the winding trails. Others claim the soldier will manifest directly, his sudden terrifying appearance enough to send even the most determined treasure hunter fleeing down the mountain in a panic. The landscape of Tomball Mountain is a character in the story itself. It's not a dramatic, towering peak, but a rugged, sprawling hill covered in dense forest that feels ancient and secretive. To walk its paths is to feel a sense of isolation, a disconnect from the modern world. The ubiquitous stone walls, built by farmers 2 centuries ago and now being slowly consumed by the forest, serve as constant reminders of the past. It's an environment that easily lends itself to ghost stories, a place where the shadows play tricks on the eyes and the wind sighing through the pines can sound like a mournful whisper. The legend of the ghostly soldier of Egremont endures because it taps into the very soul of the region. It's a story of the American Revolution, the foundational event of the nation, played out on a local, human scale. It speaks to timeless themes of duty, betrayal, greed, and loss. Whether he is the loyal sentry or the cursed thief, the soldier represents a soul trapped with the powerful emotions of his time. He's a permanent spectral fixture in the Berkshire landscape, a lonely figure forever marching on the edge of history, his silent vigil, a haunting reminder of the stories the ancient mountains keep. Now, in the annals of American history, there are few gifts to a president as peculiar or as grand as the Cheshire Mammoth cheese. It was a colossal 1,235-pound wheel of cheese, a testament to the fervent patriotism of a small Berkshire town, presented to President Thomas Jefferson in 1802. The story of its creation and journey to Washington, D.C. is a well-documented piece of political history. But woven into this factual account is a strange and enduring local legend, a tale of a mysterious disappearance and an even more mysterious reappearance that elevates the story from a historical curiosity to a classic Berkshire mystery. The story begins with Elder John Leland, a fiery and influential Baptist preacher in Cheshire, Massachusetts. In the early 19th century, New England was a bastion of the Federalist Party, which viewed Thomas Jefferson and his Democratic Republicans with deep suspicion. But Leland and his congregation were staunch Jeffersonians. For them, Jefferson was a hero, the champion of religious freedom and the author of the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom, a document that was profoundly important to minority denominations like the Baptists, who had long suffered under state-sponsored churches. When Jefferson was elected president in 1800, Leland sought a way for his small community to make a grand gesture of support, one that would be impossible for the nation and the Federalist press to ignore. The idea was born. They would create a cheese of monumental proportions. It was a perfect symbol. Just as a cheese is formed from the milk of many cows, their community was united in its devotion to the new president. The call went out to the farmers of Cheshire and the surrounding towns. The undertaking was to be a purely patriotic Republican affair. According to the proud lore of the town, a strict edict was issued. No milk from a Federalist cow was to be used in the creation of the cheese. The community rallied with enthusiasm. On a single day in July 1801, the milk from an estimated 900 Republican cows was brought to a central location. A massive cheese hoop, 4 feet in diameter, had been constructed, and a giant cider press was repurposed for the monumental task of pressing the immense curd. The town turned out to watch the spectacle, a festive and deeply symbolic event. When it was finished, the Cheshire Mammoth cheese was a behemoth, a golden wheel of patriotism weighing over 1,200 pounds. It was inscribed with the motto, "Rebellion to tyrants is obedience to God." The town's pride was immense. It's here, between the cheese's creation and its celebrated journey, that the story takes a strange turn into the realm of folklore. The legend introduces a character absent from the official historical record, a local Native American shaman. The reasons for his discontent vary with the telling. Some versions of the tale say he was angered by the encroachment of the settlers or by the zealous Christianity of Elder Leland's flock. Other versions speak of a more personal slight. Whatever the cause, though, the shaman, who was said to possess great power, decided to strike at the town's pride by placing a curse on their magnificent creation. One morning, the town awoke to a baffling and humiliating scene. The mammoth cheese, the object of so much effort and pride, had vanished from the cider press where it was curing. Panic and confusion ensued. How could a 1,200-pound object simply disappear overnight? There were no tracks, no witnesses, and no explanation. Elder Leland was mortified. The grand gesture was now a source of ridicule. The town's triumph had turned to ash. The shaman's curse, it seemed, was potent indeed. The disappearance, according to the legend, lasted for several days. Search parties were organized, but they found no trace of the colossal cheese. Just as despair began to set in, the mystery deepened. On another morning, the townspeople arrived at the press to find the cheese had returned. It was sitting exactly where it had been, completely intact and unharmed. There was, once again, no explanation for its reappearance. The shaman, having made his power known and having thoroughly humbled the town, had apparently lifted his curse. While this tale of a vanishing cheese is almost certainly a folkloric embellishment, a piece of local color added to an already fantastic story, it has become an inseparable part of the legend. The more prosaic reality is that the cheese was simply moved to a wagon in preparation for its long journey. But the legend persists, adding a layer of Berkshire weirdness to the historical account. With the cheese safely and permanently back in their possession, Elder Leland began the artist's journey to Washington, D.C. in the winter of 1801. The cheese was loaded onto a sled and drawn by a team of horses, becoming a spectacle that drew crowds in every town it passed through. From Hudson, New York, it was loaded onto a sloop for the sea voyage to the capital. On New Year's Day, 1802, Elder Leland proudly presented the mammoth cheese to President Jefferson at the White House. The Federalist press had a field day, mocking the mammoth gift from the rustic farmers of Massachusetts, but Jefferson, a master of political theater, received it with grace and gratitude. He made a point of serving the cheese to his guests for months, and he sent a handsome payment back to Cheshire. The Cheshire Mammoth cheese is remembered today as a powerful symbol of grassroots democracy, a heartfelt gift from ordinary citizens to a president they revered. But in the Berkshires, it's remembered as something more. It's a story that perfectly captures the character of the region, a place where verifiable history and strange, inexplicable folklore can rest side by side, as comfortable and inseparable as a giant cheese in a cider press. Rising to an elevation of 3,491 feet, Mount Greylock is the highest point in Massachusetts, a majestic and often cloud-shrouded peak that has inspired writers like Herman Melville and Henry David Thoreau. Its slopes are covered in a dense ancient forest, and its trails offer breathtaking views and a profound sense of wildness. But amid this natural beauty lies one of the Berkshire's most tragic and enduring ghost stories, the tale of the Old Coot, a heartbroken Civil War veteran whose sorrowful spirit is said to forever wander the mountain that became his final, lonely refuge. The story begins in 1861 in the nearby town of North Adams. As the nation fractured and the Civil War erupted, a farmer named William Saunders answered the call to duty. Like thousands of other young men, he left his home, his farm, and his beloved wife, Belle, to fight for the Union. For about a year, Belle received letters from the front, but then the correspondence abruptly stopped. Sometime later, she received the devastating news that every soldier's wife dreaded, a formal report stating that her husband had been gravely wounded in battle and was in a military hospital. It was the last official word she would ever hear of him. Alone, with a farm to run and children to raise, Belle waited and mourned. But as the months turned into years with no further news, hope faded, and she accepted the grim reality that she was a widow. In need of help and companionship, she hired a local man to work the farm. In time, their working relationship blossomed into an affection, and eventually they married. Her new husband was a good man who adopted her children as his own, and a new, happy family life took root on the old Saunders farm. The war ended in 1865, and the soldiers who had survived began the long journey home. One day, a ragged, bearded man in a tattered Union uniform stepped off the train in North Adams. It was William Saunders. He had not died of his wounds, but had endured a long and brutal recovery in a series of overcrowded military hospitals, far from home and unable to send word. He had survived the war, and, with his heart full of hope, he began the final walk to his farm, dreaming of the reunion with his beloved Belle. As he approached his property, though, he saw a scene that shattered his world. Through the trees, he saw his wife on the porch, laughing with another man. He saw his own children, now older, running and playing in the yard, calling this other man Daddy. The life he had fought and bled for, the life he had clung to through the horrors of war, was no longer his. In that single, devastating moment, William Saunders became a ghost, a man out of time and out of place. Overwhelmed by a grief too profound to bear, he did not announce his return. He did not confront his wife or reclaim his life. He simply turned on his heel and walked away, his heart broken, his spirit crushed. He walked toward the looming silhouette of Mount Greylock, seeking solace in its vast, indifferent wilderness. High on a remote slope, in a secluded area known as the Bellows Pipe, he built a crude shack and began a new life as a hermit. The war and his grief had ravaged his appearance. He was gaunt, his beard was long and unkempt, and his eyes held a permanent look of sorrow. He became known to the few hunters and loggers who frequented the area only as the Old Coot. No one recognized him as the farmer who had gone off to war years before. He lived a solitary existence, hiring himself out for odd jobs on local farms to earn what little he needed. In a cruel twist of fate, it's said that he sometimes worked on his own former farm, taking meals at the table with the family that should have been his. He sat as a stranger among his own children, his identity a secret locked away behind his sorrowful eyes. Whether Belle ever recognized the sad, ragged man as the husband she once loved is a question lost to history. For years, the old coot lived this lonely life on the mountain. Then, one bitter winter day, a group of hunters, seeking shelter from a storm, came upon his shack. Inside, they found him cold and dead. But as they stood over his body, they witnessed something that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. They saw his spirit, a shimmering ethereal form, rise from his earthly remains. The ghostly figure didn't linger, but immediately turned and moved away, heading further up the mountain, disappearing into the swirling snow. This was the first sighting of the ghost of the old coot, but it would not be the last. Since that day, hikers and visitors on Mount Greylock, particularly along the Bellows Pipe Trail, have reported seeing the apparition of a bedraggled, sorrowful man in the tattered remains of a Union uniform. He is always seen walking with a determined, mournful gait, heading up the mountain, but he is never seen coming down. He is a ghost trapped not by a curse or by violence, but by a grief so immense that it has tethered him to the place where he nursed his broken heart. His silent, eternal journey up the mountain is a poignant and heartbreaking echo of a soldier who survived a war only to lose everything he had been fighting for. Now, for nearly 250 years, the Red Lion Inn has stood as the venerable heart of Stockbridge, Massachusetts. With its sprawling front porch lined with rocking chairs and its iconic Red Lion sign, it's the quintessential New England inn, a cherished landmark that has welcomed travelers, artists, and even presidents. It has survived fires, weathered economic depressions, and borne witness to centuries of American history. But beneath its warm colonial charm lies a reputation of a different sort. The Red Lion Inn is widely considered to be one of the most haunted hotels in the country, a place where the spirits of past guests and employees are said to linger, becoming as much a part of the inn's fabric as its antique furniture and creaking floorboards. The inn's history began in 1773, when it was first established as a small tavern by Silas Papoon. Since then, it has grown, changed hands, and was even rebuilt after a devastating fire in 1896. This long and storied past, filled with countless human dramas, is believed to be the source of its spectral energy. The very walls seem to have absorbed the motions and experiences of generations, creating a place where the past does not feel past at all. While paranormal activity has been reported throughout the sprawling property, it's the fourth floor that is known as the undeniable epicenter of the hauntings. The most famous of the inn's resident ghosts are a pair of apparitions frequently seen on this top floor. The first is that of a young girl, perhaps 6 or 7 years old, often seen carrying a bouquet of flowers. Guests and staff have reported seeing her fleetingly in the hallways, a small spectral figure in old-fashioned clothing who vanishes as quickly as she appears. Some accounts say she is sometimes accompanied by a ghostly cat. Her identity is unknown, but the prevailing theory is that she was a guest who either died at the inn or is eternally searching for her parents. Her presence is generally not considered malevolent, but rather poignant and a little sad. The second prominent ghost of the fourth floor is a much more formal and sometimes more startling figure. A gentleman dressed in period attire, complete with a top hat. He is most frequently associated with room 301, one of the inn's most notoriously haunted rooms. Guests staying in this room have reported a range of unsettling experiences. Some have been awakened in the middle of the night to find the spectral gentleman standing silently at the foot of their bed, watching them sleep. Others have felt a distinct sensation of their bed linens being tugged or pulled away by an unseen force. He's a more imposing spirit than the young girl, though he too seems more curious than threatening. It's believed he may have been a guest who suffered a heart attack or died in his sleep in that very room. Beyond these two famous phantoms, a host of other unexplained phenomena contribute to the inn's haunted reputation. Disembodied voices are a common report, with staff and guests hearing faint whispers of their names being called in empty hallways. The sound of phantom footsteps is often heard on the old wooden staircases and along the fourth floor corridor late at night. Also, objects are said to move on their own. Rocking chairs, a signature feature of the inn, have been seen rocking gently in otherwise empty rooms. Staff have reported setting up a room for new guests, only to return and find objects have been moved or rearranged. Even the famed American artist Norman Rockwell, a longtime Stockbridge resident and a regular at the inn, is said to have once seen a ghostly figure in a window while painting the building. Now, the spirits are not limited to former guests. The ghost of a former cleaning lady is said to still be on duty, a diligent spirit who takes her work very seriously. And in the basement, which now houses the inn's pub, a more cantankerous male spirit named George has been reported. Staff have blamed him for flickering lights, mysterious electrical malfunctions, and the occasional beer tap turning on by itself. Unlike many establishments that might downplay such stories, the Red Lion Inn has long embraced its spectral residents. The staff are open about the hauntings, and the inn's reputation is a significant draw for paranormal enthusiasts and curious travelers alike, hoping for a brush with the supernatural. The ghosts of the Red Lion Inn are not seen as a curse, but as a unique and fascinating part of its living history. They are the ultimate long-term guests, spirits who, for reasons of their own, have chosen to never check out. Whether they are tied to the inn by tragedy or simply by a deep affection for a place they loved in life, their presence adds another layer of mystery and wonder to one of America's most historic and beloved inns. Scattered throughout the forests and forgotten fields of the Berkshires, hidden beneath tangled roots and centuries of accumulated earth, lies a profound architectural mystery. Hundreds of stone chambers, meticulously constructed and ancient in appearance, dot the landscape. They are silent, enigmatic structures, their origins and purpose the subject of fierce and fascinating debates that pit mainstream archaeology against alternative theories of ancient mariners and indigenous spirituality. These chambers are more than just historical curiosities, they are a puzzle in stone, challenging our understanding of pre-colonial and early American history. At first glance, a typical chamber might be dismissed as a simple root cellar. They are semi-subterranean, built into hillsides with dry stone walls, meaning they use no mortar, and are often capped with massive multi-ton stone slabs as lintels and roofing. This is the foundation of the most widely accepted and most prosaic explanation that these structures are nothing more than colonial root cellars built by early American farmers in the 18th and 19th centuries to store produce and keep it from freezing in the harsh New England winters. Now, this theory is certainly plausible. Many of these chambers are located on the grounds of old farmsteads, and their function as a cool, stable storage space is self-evident. Proponents of this view argue that colonial farmers, being practical and resourceful people, simply used the abundant fieldstone to build these structures. The semi-subterranean design would have been an effective and logical way to use the earth itself as insulation. From this perspective, the chambers are a testament to the ingenuity and hard work of the region's early settlers. However, for a growing number of researchers, amateur archaeologists, and historians, the root cellar theory is woefully inadequate. It fails to account for a host of features that suggest a far greater antiquity and a much more sophisticated purpose. The craftsmanship alone is often staggering. The precision of the stonework, and most notably, the use of enormous capstones, some weighing several tons, seem far beyond what would be necessary for a simple vegetable cellar. How, critics ask, did a farmer with limited tools and manpower quarry, transport, and place these massive stones with such precision? The most compelling evidence against colonial theory lies in the sky. A significant number of these chambers exhibit precise astronomical alignments. Their long, narrow entrance passages are often oriented to frame the rising or setting sun on the winter or summer solstices or the spring and autumn equinoxes. This suggests a ceremonial or ritualistic purpose, a way of marking the changing of the seasons that was central to the spiritual lives of many ancient cultures. To the people who built them, these were not just structures. They were sacred calendars, places where the celestial and terrestrial worlds intersected. This astronomical evidence has fueled several alternative theories. The most controversial of these is the idea of pre-Columbian European contact, a theory of diffusionism championed by the late Harvard biologist Barry Fell. Fell and his followers argued that the chambers bear a striking resemblance to megalithic structures found across Europe, such as the dolmens of Ireland and the passage graves of Britain, which date back thousands of years. They proposed that ancient mariners, perhaps Irish monks fleeing the Viking invasions, or even Bronze Age sailors, made their way to North America long before Columbus and brought their building techniques with them. Bell even claimed to have found inscriptions in ancient European scripts like Ogham carved into the stones, though these claims have been widely disputed and debunked by mainstream archaeologists. A more recent and increasingly respected theory posits that the chambers are the work of Native Americans. While the Algonquin-speaking peoples of the Northeast were not typically known as builders of large stone structures, this theory suggests the chambers could have served as specialized ceremonial sites. They may have been kivas or sweat lodges, or private sanctuaries for shamans to perform rituals, seek visions, or communicate with the spirit world. The astronomical alignments fit precisely within this framework, as Native American cultures possessed a deep and sophisticated understanding of celestial cycles. The primary challenge to this theory is the lack of a direct, unbroken oral tradition linking modern tribes to the construction of these specific sites, a tragic consequence of the cultural disruption caused by European colonization. Today, the debate rages on. The official archaeological community largely holds to the colonial root cellar theory, viewing the alternative explanations as romantic fantasy. Yet, the questions persist. If they are just cellars, why the massive capstones? Why the precise solar alignments? Why is there complete absence of any mention of building these elaborate structures in the countless diaries, letters, and farm records left behind by the colonists? The stone chambers of the Berkshires remain an unsolved mystery, a silent challenge to our accepted historical narratives. They are a tangible link to an unknown past, their purpose lost, but their presence undeniable. Whether they're the work of resourceful farmers, ancient European explorers, or Native American shamans, they are a profound and humbling reminder that the hills and forests of New England still hold some deep secrets. In the quiet, pastoral town of Sheffield, Massachusetts, nestled in the southern Berkshires, a terrifying story unfolded in the 1980s that seemed torn from the pages of a horror novel. It was a case that would attract the attention of the world's most famous paranormal investigators and culminate in the dramatic rite of exorcism. Unlike the sorrowful ghosts or mysterious cryptids that populate much of Berkshire folklore, the haunting of this unassuming home was attributed to something far more ancient and malevolent, a demonic infestation. The story centers on a family who moved into their Sheffield home hoping for a peaceful country life. The names and specific details of the family have often been kept private to protect them from the sensationalism, but their terrifying experience has become a cornerstone of New England paranormal lore. The activity began subtly, as is often the case in such accounts. It started with unexplained noises, footsteps in empty hallways, strange scratching sounds from within the walls, and doors that would open or close on their own. At first, the family tried to rationalize these occurrences as the quirks of an old house, but the phenomena quickly escalated, moving from strange to deeply unsettling. Objects began to move inexplicably. Kitchen utensils would be found scattered across the floor, and personal items would vanish from one room only to reappear in another. A cold, oppressive atmosphere began to permeate the house, a palpable sense of being watched by an unseen and unwelcome presence. Family members reported seeing shadowy figures darting at the edges of their vision and hearing disembodied whispers that seemed to mock and threaten him. The activity soon took on a more physically aggressive and terrifying nature. The family reported being pushed by unseen hands, and mysterious scratches appeared on their bodies. The children were particularly targeted, complaining of terrifying nightmares and seeing monstrous figures in their bedrooms at night. The family's emotional and psychological state began to deteriorate under the relentless spiritual assault. They were living in a state of constant fear within their own home. Desperate and terrified, the family realized they were dealing with something far beyond their comprehension. This was not a simple haunting by a lost soul. It felt intelligent, malicious, and profoundly evil. In their search for help, they turned to the one couple in the country known for handling such extreme cases, Ed and Lorraine Warren. Ed Warren was a self-taught demonologist, and his wife, Lorraine, was a professed clairvoyant and medium. By the 1980s, they had achieved international fame for their work on high-profile cases like the Amityville Horror and the Perron family haunting, which would later inspire the film The Conjuring. The Warrens specialized in what they identified as demonic activity, infestations by non-human, evil entities, which they considered far more dangerous than human ghosts. Upon arriving at the Sheffield house, the Warrens conducted their investigation. Lorraine used her clairvoyant abilities to sense the nature of the entity, while Ed documented evidence and interviewed the family. They quickly concluded that the family was not dealing with a ghost, but was the target of a demonic entity that was attempting to break down their free will in order to possess one of them. The Warrens claimed the entity was using classic tactics of infestation, oppression, and aggression to terrorize the family into submission. They documented cold spots, foul odors with no discernible source, and the physical evidence of scratches and moved objects. Convinced that the family was in grave danger, the Warrens determined that the only solution was a formal exorcism of the house. They contacted a priest from the local diocese who, after reviewing the evidence and the severity of the family's plight, agreed to perform the rite. The exorcism itself was reportedly a violent and terrifying ordeal. As the priest began the prayers and rituals, the house allegedly erupted in a furious display of paranormal activity. The family and investigators present described a cacophony of horrific sounds, growls, shrieks, and banging from all corners of the house. The temperature plummeted, and a powerful unseen force was said to have slammed doors and thrown objects across rooms. The entity was fighting back, resisting the sacred rites with all its power. According to the Warrens' account, the priest stood his ground, continuing the prayers for hours until, finally, a sense of peace settled over the house. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, and the malevolent presence was gone. The power of prayer prevailed. In the aftermath, the family reported that the terrifying activity ceased. They were left traumatized by their experience, but were finally free from the torment that had consumed their lives. The Sheffield Demon House became another chilling case file for the Warrens, a stark example of what they believed to be the reality of demonic evil in the modern world. The story serves as a dark and unsettling counterpoint to the more romantic ghost stories of the Berkshires, a terrifying reminder that some legends speak not of sorrowful spirits, but of an ancient and oppressive darkness. From the sorrowful spirit of a heartbroken soldier on Mount Greylock to the malevolent force that terrorized the Sheffield home, the stories of the Berkshires are as varied as the landscape itself. They are tales born of tragedy, of history, and of the deep primal fear of the unknown that lurks in the dark woods and old houses. Whether you believe them to be literal truth, folkloric warnings, or simply the products of overactive imaginations, their power is undeniable. These legends have woven themselves into the fabric of this region of New England, becoming a part of its identity. They remind us that the past is never truly gone. It echoes in the rustling leaves, in the silence of a stone chamber, and in the chill that runs down your spine on a lonely country road. So the next time you find yourself in these beautiful ancient hills, listen closely. You might just hear the whispers for yourself. I'm Steve Stockton. Thanks for listening.